A warm welcome to this information event about the next generation internet. My name is Johan Lindberg. I work here at the Swedish Innovation Agency and is hosting this meeting, both physically in our offices here, but also online, people following our webcasts. So first, a small bit of information. So since we are webcasting the entire event, if you want to ask question, please wait until you get the mic so that people viewing online also can follow what your question is. We have a very interesting program today. So now in the morning, we will present a lot of examples of what is going on in this next generation internet. And then after lunch, we will come back and present more details about upcoming calls and the future of this initiative. I will hand over to my colleague, the National Contact Point for the Next Generation Internet, Rebecca Steinert at RISE, whom will explain more what is about to come in this day.
Thank you very much. So I'm Rebecca Steinert from RISE, and I'm your National Contact Point for the Next Generation Internet Initiative. And this is now the third workshop in order, where we will today focus very much on the practicalities for SMEs and startups and internet researchers, how they can get funded by open calls. But what is also different from previous workshops is that we will have 6 very nice presentations that will give us a little bit more food for thoughts, such that it will be giving you hopefully a wider perspective on why we need the Next Generation Internet Initiative in the first place. So I hope that you will enjoy this session. So I will welcome the first speaker, and that is Per-Olof Sjöberg from RISE. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. Rebecca, she told us that we could talk on any topic within this area. And so I picked one that I haven't really talked about before, and I found it afterwards a little dystopian. But you will see what it contains. So, but it's I call it AI and personal data. So. And the first question I wanted to ask and take this off the table is, will AI take our jobs? And we could answer with a yes. And that could conclude my presentation, but I will continue a little bit more because new ones will be created for sure. But and we don't really know what we see some that were created due to AI. We know that we will lose some, and RPA is coming in, and is a great access to or adds to the area as well. But that is not the greatest challenge, because I think whenever a job is taken, and we can see it, we can control it by regulations or taxation or other type of actions. But the challenge is the AI that we don't see, the hidden AI, and that's so I see 2 major challenges in this area with the hidden AI, which I will disclose a little bit later, because first. We're going to go into personal data. As you're sitting here, you know that you're giving away data through your phone. You are feeding the cloud with data, and sometimes you do it deliberately, and sometimes you do it unintentionally. And that it's also, of course, that's the way. We are giving data, we also are gaining something. And we are gaining these type of personalized services. And data is the base for these personalized services. And that's such a strong force with the personalized services. But let's look a little bit on the personal data that we are giving away. Surf, for instance, I mean, everybody knows that you are, so to say, being looked at when you surf. When you do shopping, other type of applications and tracing, of course, is something that you give away data on. And you have maybe a watch. And that's just the start of sensors close to your body, of course. And then when you're going up there with health records, that's something you deliberately give away in most cases. And when you give away genome, you're not only giving away your own data, you're giving away your family's data, your children's data. So that we need to be a little careful about, of course. And based on these massive data that we all are giving away, these services can be created. And it's, as I said, it's so powerful, these personalized services. So it develops society. And today, when we are going to one place to another, that we are going into Google Maps and we get a fairly good estimate on how long time it will take. And that's due to, of course, that everybody's giving away data. We even get upset if we wind up in a traffic jam and we didn't see that. And that's due to that we are sharing data. But it needs to be done in a controlled fashion. But the more we give away, the better we will be served. And it's also a matter of giving away, having control of it, giving it to certain specific occasions, and then being able to retrieve it. So it's a balance. That's why I did this board here, and it should balance the giving away data and getting personalized services. So let's return to these two biggest challenges with the AI, as I mentioned. AI will be better in social interaction than we as humans be. It will interpret the slightest, the slightest movement that we're doing, either on the internet or in real life. And so it will read our patterns, and patterns like that could be whenever you type on something on your keyboard, or you're feeding it with your watch, or anything that actually is due to that you certainly you have a reaction. And a lot of this will be gathered through sensors. And what AI will do, it will adapt to our needs. And that means that people will appreciate it very much. They will love it, because this will keep their dopamine level on a specific point there where it's optimized. And taking an example also of Google Glasses, that means that you, by having them, you can get support in the social interaction. So yeah, you actually get more and more depending on that AI supports you in these different type of situations. So that means that AI will know us better than we do ourselves in the long run. So what is the effect of that? It can, of course, lead to manipulation. And the second one is that we will trust AI too much. We will, in many situations, depend on the advice and ask for advice, ask for recommendations from AI. And AI will respond to that, and the response will be based on huge amount of data. And by that, we are getting more and more depending on that. Even though most cases we are saying today that humans will take the final decision. There will be a button, yes or no. But there will be recommendations, and people will tend to follow that recommendation to a much larger extent than we do today. Due to that, it's based on such a large amount of data. And it's also very convenient to follow advice and recommendations. So we will tend more and more to rely on that. I think we will get support by AI in these type of decisions in many situations. I mean, even in situations where we are supposed to get married, we will get an estimate on what's the chance of us being married after 3 years. And it may sound like a Black Mirror episode, but we are not too far away from that, actually. So, and what is the outcome of that? Humans may become obsolete. And both these examples are hidden AIs. And that's why I think we need to be very cautious about them. So, but it's such a strong power, of course, in AI. So we can say that data develops society, but we should be aware of the hidden AI and take control over our own data. That was it. Wasn't that dystopian?
Thank you very much. So, next speaker can please come up and prepare. And then I will ask you a question, or maybe a couple of questions, depending on the answer. So the Next Generation Internet Initiative is very much oriented on solving a wide set of issues that relates to privacy and trust and security in the internet. And like everything else, we also expect that there will be a lot of applications that are AI-driven and that will handle a lot of data. Mm-hmm. So given this dystopian prediction about AI...
Or hopeful.
I mean, NGI could actually be part of solving it. But what do you see would be the main priority in, for example, making AI-driven applications trustworthy?
Wow. I think transparency is a key issue in this, that we know what we're doing within the applications. And I think that's easier said than done, but that's something we need to work in every application that we are doing. And I think we have a responsibility, all of us in this area, that we work together to solve the issues and be open on what we are doing with it. And I think the more we work with AI, the better we will know how to handle it. So it's really something that we need to embrace.
And how do you think about achieving transparency? Who has the main responsibility there?
I think that's. I mean, the government certainly has a role in this, but I think we, as humans, also have a large responsibility to work with that and to bring things forward and to have an openness in it. So I think the next speaker will come into this specific issue. So.
Definitely. So one last question, because I'm getting really curious. So what would you say are the most effective way to actually influence such a development that goes towards taking responsibility for achieving transparency?
I think what we need to do is inform and communicate around these issues. And politicians certainly have a huge role in this. And we need to educate them so that they understand as early as possible, even though they will always be behind. Legislation will always be behind. If we can minimize the gap, I think we would benefit from that. And also other people in positions that take decisions, they need to be aware. And that's why these type of initiatives are very important, that we bring these questions up as early as we can. and try to solve them. Right now, I don't think we have all the answers, but the more we work with it, the more answers we will have.
Right, because it's not only a matter of technical development and technical solutions, it's also to gain insights about the unanticipated side effects of digitalization at large scale and AI deployment and so on. All right, thank you very much. Another applause.
Thank you very much. Sure.
So next speaker who's up is Jakob Dexe. He is also from RISE.
Yes. Thank you very much. I did not intend for my slide to be the answer and question for the first speaker. But as you can see from the title of the presentation, I'm going to try to go a bit deeper into the question that Peo and Rebecca just talked about. Namely, how do we create trust in technology, and how should we think about algorithms? So I'm going to start way before AI with this. Does anyone know what these are? These are called Shirley cards. The Shirley card was made so that photography shops, when they got the mixture for the development fluid for photographs, so that they could get the mixture right, they got a reference card that showed certain colors, that had a face that the people were familiar with to some extent, so that they could get the same results every time when they mixed up these chemicals. This, to some extent, is an algorithm. We have a fixed set of types of chemicals that we can use. We have a result that we're after with the images of Shirley. And this will lead to different outcomes. The Shirley cards is one of the reasons why photos from way back when differ slightly when people have different skin color. We made a rule without an AI, without a computer taking that example and giving it to people. Instead, it's us humans that have made a process, and we follow that process, and systems, the errors show up because we don't think properly about what effects the system might have and the rules might have. Another way to think about this and about algorithms, and now there's going to be some nudity, are these. These are images created by a French activist called Robert Borat. These are made by an adversarial learning system, where one system has looked at a bunch of art portraying nude people, and then this machine has tried to recreate images that shows what it has learned. And then another system has been set to try to identify when these images are nudity. This is like a Facebook filter for filtering nude images. We can see that there are certain features in the images that remind us of naked bodies in art. We have the skin color, of course, very representative of everyone alive. We have certain forms. We have certain dark patches that could be evocations of bodily features, but they aren't humans. They're not. Especially the faces are extremely weird. What I'm trying to say with this image is that when we set computers to try to look through information and try to decide for us, the computers won't decide on what the thing actually is according to us, but it can only identify features that are shared by the images that people say contain nudity. That's not the same thing. So we will always be limited to some extent by the data sets that we create, because we have assumptions of what goes into the images that we create. and that we give a system. So, what might effects of this be? I'm going to give you some statistics. These are unfortunately in Swedish, but I will translate them. So, this is a survey made done on 1,000 Swedish individuals. Do you see the increased use and collection of personal digital information in society generally as a positive or generally as a negative for you as a private individual? The dark pink sees it as a positive, the light pink sees it as a negative. And 2015, the light pink should be 60%, nothing else. So what we see here is that most people are generally negative towards increased data use and surveillance. At the same time, to what extent are you worried that the use of personal information you share digitally can be used for purposes with which you are not comfortable? The dark pink here says they're not worried, light pink says they're worried, and the gray says neither worried or not worried. What we can see here is that since 2015, there has been a doubling of the people who are concerned that data can be used for purposes with which they are not comfortable. This is a trust gap we have in the data-driven world. We want to use data. Most people want to use services that use data, but also we have an increased concern that data can be used for purposes with which we are not comfortable. We need to somehow bridge that divide. Another question we asked this year was, to what extent do you agree with the following statement? I think that I have a choice when it comes to sharing personal information digitally in my everyday life. Only 21%, number 4 and number 5 here, agree to some extent with that statement. That is a problem. Only 21% of people think that they have a choice when it comes to sharing data online. This is not ideal when it comes to privacy, and I'm going to try to explain to you why. Because privacy is all about context. So think of these two guys in the middle here. You make certain assumptions about them, about their relationship, about their employment perhaps, about their personal lives. It's a situation most people can probably recognize themselves in. If we alter this image slightly, you will get a totally different idea of what their relationship is and what kind of assumptions you make about them. Not because that the information about either of them has changed very much, but because of the context in which that information is presented. Another way to think about this is imagine yourself being on a beach. You probably know pretty much what kind of clothes you're going to wear on a beach. You pretty much know how you can interact with other people, how much space you should have between towels. If you would be teleported from the beach to the subway, you would all of a sudden feel exposed, you would feel uncertain, you would feel insecure. Not because you didn't choose to wear that type of clothing that day, but because you didn't choose that context to wear that clothing. So it doesn't matter that you've shared information somewhere. That's not the problem. The problem is being aware that this is the context in which I'm sharing it. And this is the problem we have online and with digital systems. We have a hard time figuring out what the landscape looks like. In the real world, we can see where a tree is. We can see how many people are around us. We can see who we're interacting with. We can feel the tone of our voice, and we can interact with others and experience what they feel when we say something. This is hard online. This is hard with digital services. We don't know if we're in a square or if we're in a private room. We don't know who can listen in, where the information can be used. Our privacy is not violated because information is available, but our privacy is violated because we don't see the consequences that sharing that information might have. that information can be used in different ways that we didn't anticipate. So just as P.O. and Rebecca talked about, one of the most important things that we can do in order to fix this divide, to try to get more trust in digital services, is to use transparency. And that means that we need to talk about transparency considering what is relevant. We can put all the data out there, but that's usually not relevant in order to make people feel safe or make people understand the system. We need to have transparency in order to be more accountable, so that people can actually look at what a system does, so that authorities can look at what a system does and make judgments on whether or not it is viable or not, or it follows the legislation. We need to have transparency considering the ability of the consumers. Different people will have different experiences, will have different types of knowledge, and we will have to present information in different ways in order to make sure that as many people as possible can get a proper idea of what a service does. And the transparency has been made in order to create understanding, not just to get information out there, but we need to make sure that people understand the information, which means that we need to process information and present it in ways where we actually make an interpretation and get people to figure out what goes on. That sometimes means explaining things that are not part of the system, but are essential for the system to work. And we need the transparency in order to set expectations. What kind of environment are you in? If you get the expectation setting right, then privacy will be more protected. No matter what kind of information you use, if people know what you're doing, then they will be more safe and feel more safe. So yeah, that's me. Thanks.
Thank you. This was a very good follow-up presentation because another perspective on NGI is exactly how we perceive and get information presented to us. We know about the concept of filter bubbles, but there are a lot of other side effects that we haven't really addressed when we use services over the internet. So one thing that you brought up here is basically the issue of proper consent management.
Yeah.
It's actually quite difficult.
It's very difficult.
Yes, because we don't really know how to effectively design such mechanisms,
yeah.
Right?
And one of the reasons why, so one of the effects of the GDPR, for instance, is that since consent is difficult, most people have started using consent as the basis for how they build a system. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't explain what goes into it. The privacy can be violated even if you use other methods than consent. Consent is difficult, sure, but you still need to do all of these things in order to explain what the system does. You won't get around that building a system that isn't consent-based.
Exactly, and context is really everything, because you could basically be fine with sharing the same information in one situation that is presented to you, and then the same consent would be used for a almost similar situation, but that is perceived differently. Sure. And that is a problem. So do you have any examples or good examples where this has been handled properly, or do you know of how this is handled, for example, in the information processing industries, you know, the big players?
I think that you can say a lot of bad things about Facebook and Google, but they are fairly good at trying to explain what their systems do. I think most people try to think of the systems as confusing and opaque, but they actually do try to explain why you see different things. I'm not saying the explanations are perfect. They're far from perfect. But they actually do try, more than most other companies I see using data. Is
GDPR sufficient?
We don't know yet. we have another 10 years of court cases before we know what things actually mean in the legislation. So I have no idea.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, so next speaker, there you are, sorry. So, yeah. So next speaker is Anna Caracolias from the Swedish Internet Foundation. Welcome.
I was actually instructed to talk specifically about one thing, and that's a project that the Swedish Internet Foundation is running right now. And if you're not familiar with the foundation, I would say our main task is to administrate the top-level domain in Sweden.se. And we care quite a bit about the Swedish Internet infrastructure. The project Internet Access aims at describing what an access really is, because there is no such definition. Another part of the project is to develop a tool that measures the Internet access. And the third part is to come up with a maintenance model for how we maintain the definition and the test tool. And this is where our story starts. This is a national strategy, and I know there is one PO for artificial intelligence as well. For the past, I would say, 5-6 months, I've spoken or interviewed about 70 people, mainly in the public sector. And one question that I always ask is that if we're going to be best in the world using the possibilities, who's best today? No one has answered that question. And when I bring it down to say, how do we know when we become best in the world? Then it's almost embarrassing, because even if you work for the groups around the politicians, they haven't thought about that. And as a project leader, this is basic stuff. Anyway, is this something new? No, of course not. We've been talking about this for many, many years. And actually in year 2000, we had a definition of the internet access or the internet connection. At that time, it was dealt with modems and modems pools and email and such things. Unfortunately, this was very well used, but there were no one took care of it. No one was responsible for developing the specification, so it died. And throughout, since then and up until now, a ton of reports have been written about the need for actually knowing what the infrastructure looks like, how we define it. And somewhere around 2014, 2016, the Internet Foundation said that we're going to go make a stab at developing the definition. So this is the timeline for the project. We did a pre-study, and mainly one of the main tasks was to get the big ISPs on board, because if the operators didn't like this, it's not going to work. The actual definition was developed. It was delivered in May of 2019. The phase we're in right now is actually producing this or implementing this tool. And after New Year's, we're going to be working on the actual model to maintain this. So this is where we ended up. This is a document. It's called the definition, version 1.0. It was done by means of workshops, divided up into 3 groups. We had the ISPs, and they have very strict, or they have many opinions about, are you going to control us? A little bit, at the beginning, not very positive, but they realized that if they can be measured, and I would say that if their quality can be proved, they quite like it, because then they can start charging for it as well. We had the technical group, and this is where many things happen, and they worked like hell. We have the users, which was anyone else who took some kind of interest in this. And about 45 to 50 people were involved. And especially what this comes in handy is in the procurement process, because there are so many parties in the public sector without any kind of IT or internet knowledge, and they're going to procure internet access for a school, for a city, and they might even not have an IT department. So this framework, this definition is well liked by the authorities handling procurements. And it consists of actually parameters that you can measure, frame loss, delay, and such things, certain types of protocols, and also one part that's declarations, that everything from support, maintenance, operations, and so forth. Now I'm going to go back to what you said about the politicians leading us forward, and why I find it so difficult. In the reports, this is how we represent our networks. And even if you're a technician, an engineer, this is very hard to understand. And if you look at this, I worked with an ISP and had a marketing manager, and I think it took a month to describe what this ecosystem actually looks like, and how you're going to build, how you're going to produce services based on this. And one reason, I mean, we had the incumbent at the beginning, Telia in Sweden, and they controlled everything for good and for bad, but we actually knew what was going on. But since many years back, it's a market-driven development. And of course, everyone does their best, but we get small islands of implementations. Even though they adhere to regulations and specification, it doesn't really connect. So what we see today is that the end-to-end delivery is very hard to control. It's very hard to get someone to be responsible for the complete chain. And this goes back to what Jakob and P.O. said, that who holds the competence of seeing the whole picture? And I would say after my 70 interviews, it's rare that someone has the whole full picture. So then I figured, what if you do go back to pen and paper? It looks like something like this. We have the big ISPs. They're doing quite well. We have about 180 city networks in Sweden. Most of them are doing pretty well. Some of them are not. But these ISPs, to reach out to the customers, they're going to go via these networks. Exactly, it's the public sector mostly operating them. But then we have about 1,000 village networks. And I got a number here. These are about, I think, 300,000 connections. So I mean, it's a large group of Swedish citizens sitting on this village network. If we take it one step further down, this is my summer house. It's me and my husband. We control the lights, and we have some cameras. It's the heat. I have my greenhouse that's connected by Wi-Fi. We have a shed with some paint and stuff. And we pass over 2 city networks. We got the fiber installed by this network B, and all of a sudden we said, how is this connected into this? We didn't know about this. We actually thought we bought an ISP service, and when we get the invoice, it's another network operator. So I mean, we're 2 engineers, and we still don't figure this out. In the neighboring city, I have my dad. He's 82, very precious to me. Still, he takes care of himself, but in a few years, I'm sure that he will need some services installed in his home. And this sort of boils down to what this project will do. We want to measure the access points. And I took this on a personal level because it gets more of it hits people saying that, what if he's going to have some camera surveillance, a heart rate monitor, sensors? This is important that it works, and it has the quality, that it's up all the time. And what changes as well is that the these networks, they're optimized for sending data. They're not optimized for receiving data. And that, I think, will cause a big problem. I mean, for us, who cares? We might miss some paint, or my plants might die. That's not that important. But this could be applied on organizations as well, or companies. So, what do we do in this phase, and how do we work? As I said, it was somewhat a technical discussion to define the definition. We're taking a step back, and we've done an awful lot of interviews and actually mapping the real needs and identifying problems. And I should say that there are quite a few needs and problems. This will end up in our requirements process. I see it as my task to communicate and say, I mean, spread the word that this is not an easy task to if we might not even come to your dystopic situation. We might die before that, or our country might go Chapter 11 because we can't handle the national services that we need to get out. We're going to refine the definition. The way we work in this is that it's a needs, test, and data-driven approach. We're quite soon going out with some pilots. And one thing is that we're going to measure a region in Sweden in terms of connectivity, coverage, and quality on their connections. And this will also end up in the requirements process. And if you want to participate in this, you have to be, on board, and you have to be a real user. And this is going to be the measurement tool. But I guess this might be what's interesting in this, coming from the interviews. This is what I find. This is how the whole community is. No one. It's an incident-driven approach, and we think that we're going to be able to just get the whole society, every person in this country, hooked up with digital services. I'm not so sure that's... and sometimes I can think that that's why we have so many pilots within healthcare. They never really go live, because no one can really check that it's going to work. Who wants to send someone home from the hospital saying, we're going to monitor you, and then the network or the connection goes down and someone dies? I mean, it's real stuff. I found that very few organizations verify their procured internet accesses. And this is perhaps the most critical. Companies hosting our most critical applications in Sweden, they don't check their internet connections whatsoever. And I mean, if there's a break or a breakdown in 2-3 days, it's going to be tough for, 5 million people in this country, about half the population. Everyone has problems with Wi-Fi for the end-to-end delivery. Even if you have control out to a certain point, then comes the Wi-Fi. And people out there, they expect things to work, and they don't understand Wi-Fi, and they don't care about Wi-Fi. It's going to work. And so that's another... That this is what everyone wants to resolve in the industry. And then we come to the village networks. I mean, you have some fairly high-tech agricultural establishments. They're struggling to get good connections. And now when the old incumbent is deploying previous technique, what are they going to get? Some radio link, or are they going to get mobile connections where there is mobile coverage? But the good thing is that everyone wants to measure, and everyone wants to have a continuous measurement. So hopefully that's where we end up. And I think this was, Rebecca, what you were sort of wanting me to say, that it's this is a question of economy. It's I see it as issue of the democracy, and also about us feeling safe. About me saying to my dad, well, you're going to have these services at home. Will I be safe with that? Or should I be worried that his digital infrastructure is not up to speed? And this is, if you talk to the politicians who will be the ones leading us forward. I mean, the way we measure today, it's the amount of connected homes. It says nothing about the quality of these connections. So we have the goal of having 99% connected in 2025 or something like that. It says nothing about the quality. Someone estimated that in order to build internet access to the Swedish population, it's going to cost 22 billion Swedish crowns. And yesterday, PTS, or the day before yesterday, announced that they have 650 million. I mean, the difference between 22 billion and 650 million Swedish crowns is it's a huge gap. Someone, or Jakob, you mentioned the laws. Perhaps that was GDPR in place. Is that applied? But there are even other laws that hinders elderly care, for example. So if you talked about consent. Today, if you don't consent to a service, a digital service, you don't get it. So now the government is struggling with, what if you have dementia? How can you consent unless you've written something beforehand? So that hinders the deployment of these services. We had this in the news last week about governmental organizations using foreign cloud services, storing our personal data, for example, in Ireland. And I think everyone can guess that it's perhaps owned by an American company, and what they do with the data, who knows? We're probably being monitored already. And I find this lack of knowledge at many levels. That's we have to work together to actually increase the knowledge. And it leads to, I mean, over the past couple of years, we've seen some pretty severe incidents in people not being able to handle our digital infrastructure. Small examples: all the national school tests are going digital in 2022. The schools that I talk to say, we don't know what kind of infrastructure we need. They talk to the authority, the school authority, and they say, you're going to have an adequate IT infrastructure. And they say, thank you, that helped. Another example that we're talking about, a reading about hospital care. And as you all know, the hospitals in Sweden right now, they are laying off people. And they said if it was a real company, they would have filed for Chapter 11 already. So they have looked at what if they can get the aftercare, if they can decrease the time in the hospital by 2 or 3 days, how much can they save? And it's an enormous amount of money. And you better make sure that when you send them home, they're not dying because the internet connection is bad. And this, of course, I think is a good figure as well, that in 9 years, the people over 80 years old are going to increase by 50%. And we know from last summer that we couldn't find resources to care for. So it's not going to be, we're going to rely on digital solutions. I think that's about it. Thank you.
So thank you. This is also bringing up a different aspect, because when we discuss next generation internet, not dilemmas, but issues, we talk about the great divide.
Yep.
Closing the gap between those that have connections and that don't have connectivity.
Yep.
And that's also one infrastructure matter, but it's also related to those that actually can use it, that knows how to use this technology, and maybe other generations that don't have much relations to being connected. There are no services that they find interesting, for example, or they simply don't know how to use it. Now, you mentioned democracy. That's one thing. I think, what do you think about equality? I mean, it's quite related.
About equality in terms of gender equality or any kind of equality?
Any kind of equality, equal right to information and connectivity.
Well, I think we see, if you look at, if it's not gender equality, but I think if you look at the 2015 when we got many people from abroad. I would assume if you look at that group, they don't have the same setup as me or my kids have in terms of maybe connectivity in terms of mobile phones, but perhaps not fixed internet connections.
Right, that's a very interesting take, because the thing that hit my mind first was actually the countryside, where in some parts of Sweden we still need to throw our phones up in the air to actually receive an SMS. And that's a little bit of a problem, specifically if you rely on e-health and such things.
I mean, we're talking e-health, and you and I know we talked about this with the data, and since we're running the test tool Bredbandskollen, checking bandwidth, we're sitting on enormous amount of data, and I can tell you that there are areas in this country that's totally blank.
Right. So exactly, and I use Bredbandskollen a lot myself. It's a very good measurement tool, so that I can test.
And we're working
my
on
connection.
Making it better, actually.
Good.
We're going to measure more quality aspects as well.
Count me in as a beta tester.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So how are you working on, for example, closing this gap with those that are connected and those that are not connected? Because it's a problem that affects like 20% of the people in Europe.
I think my approach is, I mean, if we compare to all the experts within artificial intelligence and people doing big things and cool things, I see myself as doing very uncool things, and I'm going to be measuring. And I mean, no one does this. So I hope after Christmas that we can actually take this one region and say, look, we measured this, and this is the result. Now, we don't know if it might be good, but my feeling is that just this region might not be so good. And just post the results and say, this is what it looks like. How will this city or this community, what do you think about offering services at home or health, e-health? I mean, people are not connected. And if they're connected, it's a shitty connection. It doesn't hold the quality. So I think that just doing is my way forward. Just proving.
Exactly. So I think this is very good, because the data sets that you will collect in the future can also be used as a source for insights that we do need in order to build mechanisms that makes us be better connected.
But I have to mention, though, we are also internally struggle with the laws. I mean, consent. How do we collect data? How do we share it? And it's not an easy task to get this right. Can we sell it? Can we share it? I mean, what's the purpose of us collecting data? I mean, for the pilots, it's easy. I mean, it's going to be this one region. We're not going to do anything with it. It's going to end up in a report. But what if the next region says, we want to do this, we want to use this? That's where we are right now.
So you're basically saying that these are not open data sets?
To certain, since it's going to be personal data in it, an IP address, the position in certain circumstances will definitely be personal data. I mean, we could strip it off and you can use it for research, but it's going to be anonymized quite a bit.
All right. So anonymization is something that is a very hot topic. So I'm very sure that people and researchers working within that field can also benefit from NGI funding, because it connects to security, for example. All right, so I have one last question, because you have very concrete task and mission and vision. So how do you see that NGI architects or internet researchers could collaborate with you? Is this an open option?
What I'm looking for, of course, is participation and people, organizations telling me this is a problem. Instead of just being theoretical about what we're going to do, we're going to resolve actual problems. I mean, if there are things that people experience problems, I mean, everything can't be resolved by measuring, but maybe some problems. It needs some problems. That's what I'm looking for, real stuff.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next speaker is Claes Johannesson from Stockholm City. And now we will talk about something that is very much related to measurements and infrastructures and getting connected. And that is about smart cities and how you deploy big IoT infrastructures and how you use them.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And as you probably know, Stockholm has a vision. The vision is that Stockholm will be the smartest city in the world within 2040. But according to the Smart City Conference in Barcelona, we're already there. We were awarded as the smartest city in the world. And mostly because of that we have a strategy. And that's where I'm going to start, to talk a little bit about our strategy. In 2017, this strategy was decided by the City Council. And that is pretty not Swedish when someone actually says that the strategy will lead us forward and be the let Stockholm be the smartest city in the world. We have actually politicians that think, that are brave to say that. And as a Swede, I'm not used to work in that kind of area. But right now, I'm in the program that is about to realize the strategy. What kind of challenges do we have? We have the urbanization and the globalization. We had a lot of immigrants coming to Stockholm. We don't have enough houses for them. We have a lot of people that want to come and work within our great companies in Stockholm. We don't have enough housing for them. We have an aging population. Within about 2 or 3 years, I will retire. That means I will not sit in an elderly home. I will have an active life, and that is actually a challenge. We have a lot of old people that want to have a good life. But we also have the ones that need all kind of help that they need. And if we can have them live in their home longer, that could be a way of giving them a good life. Because everybody says that we don't have enough hands to help the old people. We have the young internet users. About 70% of the 2 years old are already there on the internet. And that's not a challenge. The challenge is what kind of teachers do we have to meet these children when they already have all the information? What kind of skills are the teachers going to teach in the future? Of course, you've heard about the environment and the climate changes. In Stockholm, we say that we will be CO2 neutral within 2030 within the organization and 2040 in the city. And as you all know, Greta, she started a mission here in Stockholm. The strategy was developed together with the academy, the business, the people working in the municipality, and the citizens. We actually were out talking to the citizens. What do you think about the future? How can you help? What do you need? So that was a very important work. The thing is that we should not stop that. Within our projects that we do have now, we still work together with the academy. We do have the business in the would work together with us. And we're not so good about working with the citizens. But Maria will tell a little bit about how she has done in her project. We will be better. So what's a smart city? What does the strategy say? It says about a smart city utilize digitalization and new technology to give us inhabitants the highest quality of life. So it's based on the citizens. The other part of the strategy is about the businesses. We should create an environment that is the best environment for the businesses. So if we can do that, we can develop smart services for the inhabitants in our city, and even for the visitors in Stockholm. So a smart city is actually a sustainable city. So in the middle, we have the quality for the citizens and the best environment. It is based on the vision that Stockholm has about ecological, financial, and social sustainability. We build the strategy on 3 pillars: open, innovative, and connected. When we talk about connected, we have developed the roads. They are a little bit better than the ones here. We also have a very nice public transportation system in Stockholm. But in the city, we also have the broadband company Stockholm that has connected all apartments in Stockholm with broadband. And that's very unique, especially when we talk to cities from other countries. They actually look at us and say, do you rely on a company that belongs to a city? They can't imagine that. What about innovation? Innovation is something that is new, but it should also add value to the new things and value to the citizens that use the innovations. We think that we can use IoT, AI, and R to make good new services in the city. Within openness, we think that we should share as much data as we can, and it's actually something written in the new budget for 2020 that every division within the city should try to see what kind of data can be shared as shared data within the city or as open data for anyone. We talk a lot about the smart city, but maybe we should change that to the smart society. Because when we talk about the services, we don't think about how people actually live so much. I usually think about my brother. He lives in Vallentuna and he works inside of Stockholm. When he travels with his bike or by car or by public transportation, he passes 5 different cities. That means that if we should develop services, we should do that together with all the citizens, all the cities. So those services work wherever he is. And we should probably not only work together with the cities, we should work with other companies too, and the region. The strategy has some enabling principles. The solutions should be built on common digital platforms. So within the city, we should not have a lot of different platforms. We should have the same platform for all the divisions or departments in the city. The systems that we have should exchange data through those central platforms. And the solutions should be based on the open standards, so we can develop them in an easy way. They should be built modularly, so we could exchange them if we want to, or when the procurement has expired. We should make agreements that enables development and innovation. It's very easy to say. but how do you make those agreements? That's a challenge for us. And this number 6 here, security and privacy protection is ensured. Of course, we have a lot of data within the city, data that is very personal, and we have to be very secure that we don't share it with anyone. But we also have a lot of data that is not personal. For example, information about how many cars passes, so we can have traffic lights that are changed within real-time operation, instead of using old statistics in how many cars that we think have passed or gave us information in an old statistic way. And this is the last point, that we should share the data within the city and outside the city. That is an important thing in this process. We have the program to realize the vision of Stockholm as the world's smartest city. And within that program, we have the part that realize the strategy. We have the technical prerequisites, and that's actually about procurement of a platform, of an IoT platform. We have another project that is about open and shared data, and it's about finding standards and the structures of how we should help our the people within the city in how they should work with the data and open it up so more people can use it. Then we have 3 priority projects: smart and connected lighting, which Maria will tell you more about. We have one project called smart traffic, and we want to have a better flow for the traffic in Stockholm. And compared to Istanbul, we have a very good city. And the third project is about smart locks, which we will try now within the elderly care department. We also have a possibility for asking for fundings within the city. So we have a few smaller projects that works in line with the strategy. So that is our way of working. So that's based on the strategy, and now Maria will tell you more about her project.
But before, I want to ask a couple of questions.
Of course.
So, yeah, nobody gets away from my questions. I will interrogate a little bit more here. This raises a number of thoughts in my head. And of course, it all has to do with privacy, trust, and security in different ways.
Yeah.
So having a city being highly connected and implement very fundamental and critical functions that are online. How do you deal with cybersecurity? Because it's not easy to hack, but once it happens, it's disastrous, right?
Yeah, we've all had it within other systems within the city, and we have a very high priority that this is something that we really must work with the whole way. So within these 3 projects, we've always started to have security people engaged in the project. So it's nothing that we ends with when the project is about to end. So we have them engaged with us from the beginning.
One other thing, apart from security, is basically trust. So how do you work up trust among the citizens? Because some citizens are maybe have a more light take on it, like I'm just walking around and I have nothing to hide. Then we have the citizens that are more aware, like me, but I still feel quite lightweight about it. And then we have other citizens that think perhaps that this is just too much because it's an infringement on the right to anonymity.
Of course, it depends on what kind of area you talk about. When we talk about steering the traffic lights, no one really cares that you have this information all the time about how the traffic is or where you get the information from. Now we're trying to get data from Google. We're buying data from them to see, can we steer the traffic based on that? I don't think so many knows about it or care so much about it because it's not very personal data. But if we, in the other hand, we have the smart locks, when actually some of the people that work with me should have the possibility to enter my home. And in that case, we must work very much on trust. And that's why we, in that project, have two parts. One, it's actually working with the people that are supposed to come home and help the old people. And the other part is procurement of the new locks. So they must work together very much, and we have to work very hard with the people that we are coming home to see, to show them how we can, how they can rely on this part.
Right, because I'm also thinking about this thing that is about consent to give away data, because it's one thing when we sit with our smartphone and we agree on using a service with all the terms, and then we give away data actively and we know about it, at least there is some awareness. But then we have this indirect input, just basically by moving around. And possibly at some point there will be AI decision-making based on face recognition that could trigger an automated decision process. So how do you work on that in the light of GDPR and other types of data protection regulation and just practical aspects? So how can I give my consent and take it back?
Of course, we're following all those rules that we should follow with GDPR and so on. And in some cases, we probably have to try it in small parts and see what it actually happens and see what if we have done the right things. As someone said here earlier today, we actually have to try, because if we don't dare to try, we can't learn anything. But of course, we should not start to doing the whole city at once. We should start in a small case and see what can we learn of that situation. So that is actually how we started this work. I don't know if it's answering your question, but...
It's an open question because it is a difficult question. I'm asking it because I think it's important to see that there are... these are big questions that are very difficult to solve, and they consist of several elements. It's partially regulations, but actually also partially technical solutions that would facilitate that type of data management, for example. And then we have the need for more studies to understand what would be the best design principles for increasing trust and taking care of it. What does trust actually mean, and so on. So there is a lot of stuff to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now we will get a presentation by Maria Holm, who is also from Stockholm city. And we will hear more about the more concrete projects about smart lighting. I think so. Thank you very much.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Now I can hear my voice. And as Rebecca said, I'm going to give you a concrete example. Having my former colleagues, I was working at RISE way back, so 2 years now I've been in the city, And we were working a lot with the reliable internet. We were working with Internet of Things. And this was all future, right? So I love to be in the city now and try this for real. And also with the challenges that goes with it. So upgrade to smart lighting grid. The project is smart lighting in the beginning, but I wanted to add and connected, because this is kind of what we're doing. We frame it like this, upgrade to smart lighting grid, because it's a lot of things in there. And when we talk about digitalization, it's not only technology, right? It's not just zeros and ones and all that stuff. And what do we mean by this? Now you already saw that one. So we're following the strategy with the sustainability goals. So this project is chosen from its financial and ecological goals. So with LED and the shift to LED, we can reduce electricity consumption quite substantially. But we can do that even further if we have a two-way communication and actually control the system more based on need. We can add another layer on that with Internet of Things. And with Internet of Things, then I'm talking about sensors. We connect them, and we stream data, we take in data, and then we make something valuable out of that. Those are the 4 pillars for me in Internet of Things. We're also looking at the soft goals, so to speak. Like, these are the values actually in it for, what's in it for the citizens? So the socially sustainable goals. Lighting is often like you think about light and you think about safety. So if you would ask a citizen, how do you feel when you walk home? Do you feel safe when you walk from the subway to your house? What is that? And in this area where we're going to be, people don't feel safe at all. In the city center, more, and out here in the this area where we're going to do the pilot, not so much. So we're going to look at this. We're actually trying to see what is this now for them in this area, and how can we measure this afterwards. The thing we're doing here is also that we're lowering energy consumption. That means that we are lowering the use of light for light pollution and other things. But we don't want this to be, it's not supposed to be noticed. You're not supposed to experience that. We want to keep this safety thing in here. Mind you that we can't create safety with light. It's a feeling, it's like just that. And then it's the experience of light. You can play with it, right? You can make it yellow, blue, all that kind of stuff. We can share it with the people in the city. And the aesthetics. Talk about sensors. We are putting stuff on those poles out there, trying out. The people in Kista, you can walk along Kistagången and you can look at the poles and there's all kinds of clutter on them. So we have to think design. And again, what do we do with the city? Are we making it more ugly, or do we beautify it? Collaboration. Claes already mentioned this. We collaborate in the city and within the project, of course. So this is something we do. We try to solve a lot of problems together. So we're running this project for a little over 2 years because it takes time. More people, more discussions, but also more coming out of it, I think. So we're running it from the executive office together with the transport department and together with the local people in Spånga-Tensta, where we're doing the pilot. And of course, the communication companies, like the connectivity with Stokab, Sankt Erik. And then also there are properties out there that are run by the Stockholm school company, those who have the real estates out there. And we collaborate also with a lot of other initiatives and locally in the area with companies like real estate companies and so on. Just swiping through that, we have an interdisciplinary team because we take on quite a few questions here in this. And then what is this? And let's see. So traffic now, Transport Department, they just changed the name to Transport Department. We're still trying to get used to that. 150,000 light points in the cities owned and managed by the Transport Department. 2007, this was the output, 65 gigawatt hours of energy consumption. Then we started to change from mercury to high-pressure sodium and metal halogen lighting, and we could actually already in 2018 see that we have decreased the consumption quite a bit. So this is equivalent to million Swedish crowns as well. The average effect then on each luminaire is 74 watts. So this is the average effect today. And then by 2040, when we are going to be the smartest city in the world, well, we're loaded to 50, hopefully, with the presence control lighting, and somewhere around here. Now, we want to push this down even further. So I'm going to do a little bit of technology, because I think connectivity is part of this project, right? And it's also the loopholes of where we bring in security. So this is today's system. We have 3 sensors in the city. So this is the sensor just pushing a note to tell, send a signal, and an actuator is actually turning on the light, and then same backwards. So we can push out information, but we can't retrieve any. So what we're trying now is to take these steps. We're here at the basics. We could just do what we're already doing, like switching to LED continuously, and we do that with about approximately 6,000 per year, because it's an investment doing that. So we can do that, but that's still basic. Then we can be advanced and use night where we actually have a control, where we have the two-way communication, and we can schedule light levels and be more of controlling the system from a remote. Then we can be smart, and that's when we're adding on more value, and this is when we take the data and do something more with it. That's how we see this, like these steps. Also about a little bit, we've been into this with procurement and how do we control things, how do we do things in a modular way in the city? Claes was talking about that, so how do we do that? So we decided in this project, in the lighting business, it's all very proprietary solutions. So you go out and you buy your kit, and you kind of from the vendor, and you have the luminaire, you have the connectivity, and you also have the software. But then if you were changing with 6,000 LEDs per year, well, then we might want to use different vendors. So maybe not the same one. It's also lasting for about 20 years. That's the good thing with LED. We don't have to change this like we do now every 4th year. So we have a longer lifetime cycle to consider. So we want this to be, we want to break it up. We also have our own network provider. So we want the city to be in part of this whole solution, the end-to-end solution. So now we procure the platform. It's actually an IoT platform, but the one that is good at steering and controlling lighting. So that's all in place. We have the infrastructure, so now we're just trying to figure out what technology to use here. We're still really not ready to go into, if it's a star network, we want a mesh network, but then we get into standards and again proprietary solutions. Not really for an upscaling. And this is already in place. So we divided this into three into 3 actual procurement processes. Before getting into the pilot area and just look at what we're doing there, I wanted to show this, just to get into the end-to-end solution, where you also need now to know that you actually can provide the secure solution of connectivity all the way out in the edge. So that when we want to retrieve information and we start to have AI, edge computing and all that stuff here, then that will work. And that no one, well, someone hack and start to, I don't know, turn off the lights in the city, make it dark. We don't want that. So this has to be really secure, links all the way through. We also see the market, right, go more and more towards cloud-based services. Why have everything on-prem when we can perhaps have better solution that is on in the cloud? We have to look very hard on this. So we work with this project. This is also a thing that we can investigate. So we have security and information classification already embedded in the work that we do. So this is just also again to show you a little bit about, like, these are the challenges, right? Here, where are the loopholes here? Then I wanted to go into the pilot area. I have a couple of more minutes. We decided to be not in the city center because, okay, we have lights on. People move around here more basically 24/7. But out in the outskirts of the city, another situation. Also another situation with different types of, like a walkway. We have walkway and tunnels. We have a square, and we're working on a square, and we have the local streets with traffic, but not so much traffic. So here, how can we work here then now to reduce and see how can we reduce the energy consumption without tempering security on the local street, or the feeling of when you walk home here that it's not really the right light. On the walkway and in the tunnels, what we're doing is that we're working with sensors locally, with the local network that is using presence detection. So you have 3 poles ahead of you lighting up, and so you're always in the light space of 6 poles. So this is, and it's from previous studies where you have actually detected that that's like the range, depending on how far away the poles are. This is what we're going to try out. It's already tried out in various places in Stockholm. The benefit also from retrieving the information is that we actually get report status for a more efficient maintenance of it. Of the whole system today, we're relying on the public to report when it's not working. You're nodding like yes. So and the result of that is that when do you notice something is broken? Well, not in June in Stockholm anyway, because then it's never dark here. So it all happens in September, October. So all the people working actually with fixing is like, woo, then you have a lot of things to do. Right now it's super busy. And instead here, this is just one of the needs that we really are looking into. This is the basics of why we're doing this. And why we retrieve this information, we can plan, we can already know. And again, it's connected to the safety, right? You feel safe. It's broken, something is broken, it appears to be forgotten or that you don't really, you know, the city is not taking care of us, kind of message. But here we want to take care of the citizens in a good way. And the local street. Again, trying to use presence detection. So we can do this in 2 ways. We can do it in that we are setting it on a model that we see that, okay, so the traffic here now has been a little bit busier, so we raise the lights. And between certain hours, we can lower the light. So we can work with that, and then we're talking radar technology, just sensing that something is happening. So when it's sensing something is happening, and you use the radar technology, you don't know what it is, and you don't know. You only know it's like something is there. Is it 1 or is it 10? So here we would like to know and get more detailed information and real-time data to actually have actual presence control without tampering with traffic security. And then, what happens then? What kind of technology do you think? It's lens technology. It's cloud or computer vision. And then follows along with that a lot of questions, right? But we thought in the pilot, we're working with this area. It's about 180 poles. So we would like to try this new technology here for more detailed information. And the key here is also that if we collect data, this kind of data, it's first, the first thing it's there for is for controlling lighting. But the second value added in this is that it's also information about flow and movement in this, because we get more detailed information on what's happening in this space. And that we can share with the city developers and the traffic management department and perhaps others. So this is where we see where we go out of our scope, we put a sensor and we can share in another way. But then again, security and privacy matters, especially in this area where there are a lot of cameras. We don't want to add surveillance. It's not about that. It's about collecting good data that we can, do something more with. Just my last slide. I see I'm running out of my time. I just wanted to show this. This is we added this to the pilot area because we wanted some interaction with the people actually living there. So this is outside the art hall in Tensta Konsthall. So it's just a newly built, it's like a staircase, but it's also that you can use it as an auditorium. And now we're adding this colorful light sky over the staircase. And this one can be controlled. We are going to try this where you share control over the lighting system. So this is run by Bluetooth, so you can actually very locally do this. So we start there. But the idea is to, in the long run, to actually have that you give permission to, for a certain event or for something else, that you can actually give back that to the citizens, right? So by that, thank you.
So thank you for that. So now I have a lot of questions that has to do with automatization and data-driven control and so on. So, but first, a number question. So you said by 2040, 30 gigawatt hours. How far or how low could you go further?
I'm gonna, so what we're saying is that we're looking at 0.6 to 1 in lowering per year with the scheme that we have of exchanging 6,000 LEDs per year. So approximately 1 or 0.6 more. If we succeed with the presence-controlled lighting, I mean, think about all the streets that are lit up with the 70 watts every day. And no one is there. No one is driving. No one is walking on the walkway. So we will calculate a little bit more on that.
We will see. Anyway, so I could see that there are a number of security challenges, and it's not really related to secure data transactions. It's more related to observing the traffic patterns.
Yeah.
How do you view that issue? Because you could basically use it for planning something like a burglary or a security breach. Or
do you mean if we share that data open and someone else make use of it?
For example, or just tap in.
Or tap in. Yeah, so we can control what we share, what kind of data we share. That's the part we can control. The security part of hacking into our sensors, that is what we need to work with now. And that's why we thought we do this in a control environment, and we're actually testing this stuff. That's my answer. So we're not gonna share that. It's not gonna. It's like Anna talked about. You do it in a pilot. I will just clarify that the pilot in parts is going to stay there. So the transport department is going to take it over and continue this. So we're in many layers in this project. But that particular, with trying that lens technique, we need to do pen testing. I mean, it's going to be a lot of that stuff.
Yeah,
and that's already planned in the project.
Exactly. I mention it because I can see that there is room for a lot of innovation to actually deal with such security matters that comes sort of from the side.
Yeah.
Another thing...
Can I just say, because one thing is that, yes, this is so vulnerable, but we need to try it. It's like, and then we learn. So not to do it, is that the option?
Nope. Definitely
just getting that through.
That's why we have the NGI initiative to support the development.
I thought it was the right
testing.
Forum to talk about these stuff. Yeah.
But there is another thing, because I could also see, because now there are sensors, there are radars, then there is statistics. One could develop that into more intelligent systems that will learn. Mm-hmm. So do you foresee any side effects, unwanted side effects, that intelligent systems will learn patterns that could be sort of detrimental to houses or citizens nearby that would be exposed to more darker areas just because the system learned it, or businesses that get more or less killed because there is more movement down the street than over here, and so on? How did you study it?
Just to make things clear, we're not turning lights off. We're just lowering. And as you see, if you just do that by a few watts, you save energy. If you put it on 150,000 light points and you reduce just a little bit, you save money. And by that, you save the environment as well, and the light pollution. So in the whole, we want to lower and dim down. I feel that I'm avoiding your question a little bit, but so what we're saying is that at this point we're not doing AI or any machine learning in the technology that we have. So we will add this. We're also following it. What we can do now in this project is to look at, we have documented by video also the visual site of the light today and how this will affect citizens. We are also trying to have contact with citizens. So we work closely with Spånga-Tensta, which is the city area. And they have field workers continuously walking in this area. So they kind of keep a diary so that we get information about what they feel about the area and what we're doing. And then we're trying to kickstart like a dialogue. We already in the beginning of the project had some workshops like what will the future lamppost look like and stuff like that, just to get the ideas with the youth out there. At that youth, there is this youth place for youth called Techgården i Tensta, Tech Tensta. So we worked a little bit with them. So we're trying to understand this in this area and what we are doing with presence detection and control.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I could imagine that there are quite a bit of work to do when it comes to working out best practices for designing such automated systems. And in particular, learning systems, it connects to trust, but also security, because a system that learns even to dim could also reveal to somebody that the house is empty or there is no movement. I don't know.
Yes, because this is the opposite of actually... when I got this project, I did dig into a little bit of criminology. So the backside is that you light up a space and you make it easier for someone to actually, like for a parking space, it's easy then to see if it's empty and what car to actually pinpoint. I'm going to that one. So then as if you are then a burglar, that helps you. So it's not always sure that lighting up things are the best way to go, according to that. But for us in the reverse is that feeling safe is that when you want light. But adaptive lighting is not, it's not going to work like, boom, you're there, it's just going to be dimming up and it's dimming down. So we have to work with this more.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now I would like to welcome the last speaker for this session, and this is Mia Rolf from Ideon in Lund, which is an incubator and science park, right?
Yes, we're a science park and an incubator.
Right. Exactly,
yes.
So hit it.
Thank you. We claim to be the place where we create the future. And since not many of you are from the south, I'm going to take a few slides to just present Ideon Science Park. So we're part of what we're now calling the Knowledge Highway, outside or soon to be inside Lund. This is where they place the European Spallation Source and the Max Lab, the nano tech labs that are... this is a national thing, and this is a European thing. And we are here. So we start here, and we go over the motorway here, and it's including 17 buildings and 410 companies and 10,000 employers at that place. And we are just next to Medical Village with another 150 companies, and Lund University starts here and goes all the way to the center of the city. So we're like super clustered around science and innovation. And some of the success stories from the park is, well, there's a mobile phone. We started in 1983. There was only farmland on the last picture. But now, and then they started to develop the mobile phones, depending on the radio transmission knowledge that they had there. And then from that came Bluetooth, and Storytel was founded and still is developing in our science park. Has now bought the Nordstedt's publishing house, so they're more in Stockholm now. And Click is a decision-making, business intelligent software, and we have the internet-connected cameras, Access Communication, security company. And the reason why you can send pictures and Zoom in your Android phones also came from here. And the digitalization of finding cancer cells. So a lot of imaging, analysis, and communication technology going around there. And today, we are 400 companies and working mainly in those 4 areas. Developing technology for smart cities, not only the connected things like we heard, but also how do we plan the cities in the future where 75% of the people on Earth are living in cities. How do we plan producing food, taking care of energy, taking care of waste and water management, and all this connected with the Internet of Things technology. Future transportation is also a mixture of competences. It could be a new smart material that is lighter and harder, but it could also be controlling the car, communicating to other cars or other things, communication to vehicles or to X, and it could also be what kind of energy are we using in the car? How can we develop that? We have also energy combustion development and things like that. And the cool thing about IDEON and this place is that even if you need a lot of different competences to solve the challenges of the future, these competences are found in this cluster. You could just walk over and have a fika, so we call it at fika distance, and solve the problem. And of course we work in health tech and smart material too. And health tech coming from the mobile industry and big data and the traditional health tech development with hardware being combined also takes a lot of competences. Not mentioned in this picture is that we also need competences in law, in ethics, and in behavioral science. And these are also found here. And what we try to do is to not only serve the startup hub. We have about 70 startups in the park. We have also a special team working for large firms when they have found their business model, and one day or the other, even Tetra Pak or IBM or Ericsson will have to be inventive again. And that's where we work with open innovation. And now we're looking at why don't we have a special team working with the scale-ups too. And since February, we signed the UN Global Compact, and we're very dedicated to these 4 goals. And we're happy about that the UN operations, or the UNOPS, has moved into this park. And we will help them from a small team sitting with us, having all the challenges from the disaster areas, climate disasters, refugee disasters, or war situations, where they basically procure things and make projects and go there to solve them. They have realized that these disasters are just increasing. We need to think of innovation, how to prevent this to happen, or use different methods to create resilient societies. And what this team will do is scout those solutions, not only in our park, but in all Sweden and in the rest of the world, and combine in new constellations to solve these challenges as fast as possible. That sounds easy. So I was asked to talk about some new initiatives going on, and this is one that I think is really is trending, that we're thinking not only regional, but we're trying to form ourselves nationally and internationally more, because all the technology that we are building or trying, they're all international, and I mean, the internet has made the world so small, and we need to work together more to solve these big questions. So the big 6 science parks in Sweden that are mostly targeting or focused around ICT have formed a relationship, and we then we represent over 2,600 companies and 59,000 employees, and we will work with 3 things mainly: talent attraction, because in order for our companies to grow the way they want, they need more programming and high-tech competences, but also in those other areas that I talked about. And we want them to move in from other countries. Because the ones we are producing in our schools today, or education system, is not enough. And we see that the SMEs and maybe also the individuals in the society are not that well aware about the need for understanding cybersecurity or cyber security challenges. And we need to increase AI competences on those levels. The big ones, they do that already, but we need to get the rest of them going. We will also work with, of course, new innovations within IoT and 5Gs. And it's not because of this, but it's a typical thing that Ericsson has a site in all these parks. And of course, we try to, by working together, find the bigger funding for this. I myself, we drive a lot of societal push, I would say. And this is just an article that I wrote about that the innovations to save the climate, or to save the world in different ways, they're already being developed, but they're not in use. The decisions are not being made. And I can say that, and then what? Because it's really difficult today to make those important decisions. And here's another example. We gathered for several workshops the whole energy industry in the south of Sweden. Big companies, small companies, innovative companies, startups, and scientists. And we had a lot of workshops working towards a 4-point suggestion to the politicians, what they should think about for the future and implement. And then what? What happened with that? Well, that ended up in a big bunch of papers going into the ministry meeting in May. And then what? So I would like to describe the challenge like this. And now it's like we want to make, we have been talking about making a test bed for autonomous driving for 2 years with different players. And we have different focuses here. You have the product focus, we have all the products, the technology is so cool, and there are so many more. These are only from our park. And then you have the service focus, well, we can help, and just let us know when you have the money, we could do it. And then you have the society focus, local politicians and decision makers. And the smaller the city, the smaller the budget, and the bigger the fear for going wrong, I would say. And then you have the stock owners. Well, why aren't you implementing these cool technologies? Should I sell my stocks? So I have this all perspective here, and then you have the human focus. If you're a user, even if you love the technology, would you actually give your data up? Or where are you in this? And we are voters, so we can push them to do the right thing or the wrong thing, and we can push the companies to move in one way or the other. So here is the focus. We need it to be, the decisions must be taken to use our technology. Rules must be upgraded, and laws must be upgraded now. And then you have this focus. We just want to help, give us the money. And then you have here, is it safe? Can I take this decision? And if I would, how did you find the right supplier? How do you know when you take that right decision? And old procurement rules, you cannot, you have, you know, it says light bulb in the procurement instruction. Can we move to LED? It's like a very difficult decision. And what does the voter say if we do something wrong? Oh my God, will we have a job? And here, why is the technology? Yeah, I talked about that. And then, is it safe? How do we know it's safe? It's not so it's easier to feel fear than to feel confident in this. And who is on our side? are they on our side? Are they on our side? Are they on our side? Nobody's on our side. And we're actually part of building this society up. So this is a really tricky environment for making the right decisions. And well, I just think you need a neutral player to pull everyone in and get things going. And it's exactly the same if you look at the initiative now. It's called AI Innovation of Sweden, and we talked about just the other day, we had a council in the south of Sweden. Can we share the data? And the perspective is also different. We have the technology. We want more data. How can we get more data to try our algorithms? Well, we could help. And but what do we want to share? I mean, you can share the light data and how people move, but is it safe? And who should we share it with? And how much should we share? And what does the voters say? And will people have jobs if we go this way? And then why is it not taking off? Should we sell the stocks? And here, if they are earning money on my data, why am I not earning money on my data? Who should I share my data with? And I don't have a slide on this, but I predict that we have to have a middleware of data broking systems that takes care of the small individuals or small companies or other institutions that you could control. I give my data to these organizations for free. So some of my data, but if you earn money on me, I want to earn money too. So that you have to deal with me. And those organizations, nope, that's a no for me, because these are my standing points. And I think that would be to give them, that is creating safety, because you can control it yourself. Of course, you need to trust that technology too. So I just want to leave you with a picture of some sort of utopia. And my idea would be that I'm starting to think of this more and more. Do we need to have like social or society simulation arenas where you can, if we tap on the lightning model that we can control, and we tap on a little bit more of self-driving cars, and we tap on that, what will happen? What's the effect? And we can see it in the simulation before we make the decisions. So this is just a food for thought. I would love to test something like that, and that's what I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think that there are several interesting collaboration points and synergies. Testbed facility. Even if we talk about, for example, autonomous driving, there are reasons to actually get in touch with you if you get NGI funded, because I see that there are synergies with, for example, testing NGI solutions, even in such a test bed, when it comes to building human-centric autonomous driving solutions.
Yeah.
And see if it actually works.
Yes.
Right?
I completely agree, and I think if we could set up such a test bed, we have all the players around, but we also have citizens. We can use it more, and we could add bio data too in that, and see what choice would the car make if the cars knows that the car knows that I will get cancer. Probably within 6 months, and I'm driving, and a critical situation happens, and another person stands in front of me. What decision will that car make? I mean, you need to test that.
Exactly. And who owns the data that my face created in a face recognition app?
Yeah, we have the face recognition technology too.
Exactly.
I actually tested it. There's a video on that. And they didn't even see me before. I didn't take the picture in that technology. They took it from internet and uploaded it, and then I could open the door. What does that even mean? What people can do? Yeah.
That's a serious security question,
Yes.
to say the least. Right, so we talked about this offline. So to my understanding, there is really nothing that would prevent anyone that gets NGI funding to actually also get in touch with you to see if there are any synergies or help that you as an incubator could help out with in the cases where there are people that are working on their startups or SMEs.
Yeah, we welcome everybody, but we only welcome startups or ideas that can connect to the global goals. That's the decision we made.
Exactly.
So.
That's what I wanted to know. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, so this basically wraps up this session. So now we will have a little break for lunch, and at 1 o'clock we will continue the webcast, and then Johan Lindberg will talk about next generation internet in Horizon Europe and how it will develop there. And then we will go straight to the actual practicalities for NGI stakeholders that want to apply for funding in the open calls. So, and that's something that we will start doing at 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, welcome back. Hope you all had a nice lunch, both the people that are here in the room today and hopefully our viewers that are also back from lunch following us on the webcast. So my name is Johan Lindberg here at Vinnova. So now myself and Rebecca Steinert from RISE will try to present a little bit what are the funding opportunities and what are the sort of future outlook of next generation internet. So we got in the morning a lot of examples, discussions, projects on the challenges within this field, but what are now the opportunities in the near future and in the more distant future. And this is, of course, a little bit challenging times. So the European Union planned their programs in 7-year cycles, and we're now entering the last year in this cycle and then have to step over into the next cycle. And in that time of year, or in that time, in that process, it's rather challenging because you have to have sort of 3 things in your head simultaneously. We both have to talk a lot about the opportunities that are really up for grabs in 2020, because there is a lot of money still left to distribute to researchers, companies, institutes, etc. So for the entire research program, the actual budget available in 2020 is 13.2 billion euros, which is a vast amount of money. It's only a small portion of that money going to the next generation internet, but also there is millions of euros up for grabs in different calls and different opportunities. But many people have this kind of notion that, well, it's in the end of the program period. All the good money is probably already gone, and you have to sort of really work to send a message that's no, you should focus on the current program period. But simultaneously, it's now that we negotiate what will next generation internet and all the other things in the research program do in the next program period. And there you have sort of a parallel process, because on the one hand, we're negotiating the entire program. So should it be climate, internet, transports, life science? And also in parallel with that, we have to already now basically start to discuss what calls do we need to do in 2021. So we're discussing on the aggregated level as well as on the detailed level, and then you have to sort of sync those 2 discussions to end up. And the reason for doing that in parallel is basically that if you want to spend money in 2021, then the European Commission needs to take a sharp budget decision in late October, early November 2020. And if you're going to decide exactly how much money to spend in 2021 in October, November, then you need all the details on the table by then. You can't sort of take a budget decision and say, we'll spend 100 million on NGI, and then we continue the discussion on exactly what. So you need sort of the sharp call text and really the focused strategies for what you want to do in 2021 to be ready in the end of 2020. And you would still end up in the situations where you can say, well, there will not be a formal decision about the next program until like November, December 2020. So you're actually pinpointing the details, not knowing if the entire program actually exists, and that's a very challenging. And I will try to walk you a bit through what that means for us and where the opportunities are to sort of keep track of this planning process and your opportunities for 2021 and forward. And then Rebecca will come back after me and talk about sort of the really hard options and opportunities that are available in the next year. So just a few words. I mean, Vinnova, we're a governmental funding agency, and we basically have 3 objectives. So we're an agency under the Ministry of Enterprise and primarily work with national funding. So we also have national funds that we put into NGI and a lot of other sectors. But today I'm here in the role of this Horizon contact point. So we're also sort of the national contact point for the EU research, and it's in that role we work here today. And then we're also an expert agency trying to advise the government and the ministries on what is working and not working in the Swedish research and innovation system. On EU level, so I mean, the first good news is, of course, that NGI is sort of one of the really main focus points in the discussions for the future. So whenever digitalization is discussed in EU, in the European Commission. They talk about the 5 big tickets, or sort of the 5 areas where we really need to work in order to make a difference in the future. And those areas are electronic components and systems, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, high-performance computing, and then next-generation internet. So it is an area with a lot of focus. We have come a long way already, but there is still a lot of things to do with this next-generation internet initiative. And to most people, I would say that the last one, next-generation internet, is usually the one area that needs a little bit of explanation. You can basically pick the man on the street and list the other 4, and they will roughly understand what they are about. But if you say next-generation internet, you can easily get into a long discussion. What is that? But for the European Commission, what they are trying to do in Europe and what we're trying to work and what we saw in the morning with the different examples is really this human-centric internet. What is sort of the services and the functionality that this vast amount of communication infrastructure that exists below us actually give us, and this support core values such as openness, decentralization, inclusiveness, protection of privacy, etc. How do we actually work with different services, problems, functionalities in order to make sort of a good internet or a human-centric internet and make that work? And then that will, of course, drop into many different technical areas: Internet of Things, AI, interactive technologies, future media, social networking, etc. They will all depend on how you make handling of data, how you make this openness, transparency, etc., as we discussed in the morning. And simultaneously, while working with these sort of value-based, or whatever you like to call them, the human-centric internet, you will have to make that meet a technology push, because you have a number of things really sort of emerging technologies or technology push in sense of virtual reality, AI, digital twins, etc. And you really have to make both ends meet and have sort of a sane development. And the sort of feeling is that this both the technology push and the human-centric internet will reshape a lot of what we today perceive as the internet in the next 10, 15, 20 years. When looking back 20 years from now, we will be in a totally different situation than what we are today. And as again, we've been talking about this morning, so the NGI vision is really along those pillars, really sort of building this internet of humans. You need the transparency, you need trust, you need resilience, you need some kind of decentralization, inclusion, and sustainability to really be able to build this internet of humans and the structure on top of that. And in order to get money then to have different projects trying to develop the many details that we need in below in order to get this kind of internet of humans, what are our options? And then we mentioned it a little bit, but I thought I'd take this slide to say, well, you have different funding streams if you want to start a project doing something nitty-gritty details. We do, of course, have national programs, so you can apply for money from organizations like Vinnova or the Swedish Research Council, etc. You also have the big research program, the EU's framework program. Then you apply from the European Commission, and you get the project and get funding directly from the Commission. And then we have this that we generally call partnership programs, where it's a partnership between the Commission, European industry, European member states, so several organizations pooling resources together and then making their own calls, funding the research projects. And then you get sort of a third stream, but the Commission money is sort of bouncing on some other organizations or some network of organizations doing the actual calls and the actual funding of the projects. And this will come back a couple of times in my presentations. As I mentioned, next program period, so 2021 to 2027, on this sort of overarching level, there's a rather large consensus in Europe between the Commission, the Member States, and the European Parliament on the overall structure of next research program. So here you basically have a three-pillar research program. You have the excellent science with the European Research Council, the research and mobility, and the research infrastructures. You have something they call global challenges, where they are clustering different global challenges. So they are clustering climate, energy, and mobility, for instance, and saying that well, the transport sector, as well as the energy sectors, as well as the climate, they are interdependent to a much larger extent. So trying to move those research programs closer to each other and say, well, how we do our transports and our mobility will influence how we use energy, which will influence how we affect the climate. And that is sort of the rationale for trying to cluster these kind of today separate research areas, but that are tomorrow to be much closer and more interdependent. For next generation internet, we have this digital industry and space cluster where you will find much of the next generation internet having its activities. And then basically the newest invention or newest proposal in the next framework program is this European Innovation Council and this Pillar 3, where they're really trying sort of to boost the entrepreneurial innovation, spin-off companies, SMEs, etc. And behind these, what is really new here is that the Commission is currently trying to elaborate a lot on what they call blended finance, and say you should, as a company, be able to go to one point and get both loans to your company, investments in your company, and project grants to run your projects, and have this sort of in one. And that's something easy to say, and it would probably be good for the companies to be able to apply for that kind of blended finance. But it's of course from the sort of the devil is in the details. How do you actually do that in a good manner and make it fly? And then down here you have this, what is called widening participation, which is very much geared to Eastern Europe, or sort of the weak countries from research point of view. So countries not having a strong research tradition, not having strong universities, etc. How do they sort of build their basis? And Sweden is of course a country with a rather strong base in our research and innovation system. So this is the overall structure, and here a consensus is emerging, and now sort of the discussion started to kick off. So it's exactly what cause should we have in all these different headlines. And for NGI, of course, it's not something that will end in 2020. It has sort of an intervention area continuing into Horizon Europe. So here you will see the different calls that has been so far and that will be in 2020, and Rebecca will talk more about them. But also sort of the vision that we're now starting the discussion, what should NGI then do in 21, 22, 23? That is really the things that are kick-starting today, or I would say picking up speed after Christmas is basically the timeline. Also to sort of slightly complicate the picture a bit, in this program period we've mainly been active in Horizon 2020, the research and innovation program. In next program period, I think we will see NGI or NGI activities, or what you like to call it, in 4 different programs. Because we will have the next research and innovation program, the Horizon Europe, that's the picture I just showed you. There will be a totally new program called Digital Europe, which is a deployment program. So it's not a research program, it's more about making good use of digitization and making sure that we enhance and strengthen the digitization in society. So it's not about research, it's more about make things happen. Digital Europe program is focused on 3 technical areas: AI, cybersecurity, and high-performance computing, but it's also focused on what they call advanced digital skills, which is sort of a large portion focused on the lifelong learning. So given AI and other technologies, your staff in your companies or your organizations will probably not have the right skills to work with that, but you don't have the ability to fire them and hire someone that knows AI. You have to really train
simultaneously your personnel and get them accustomed to the different arts of digitization. And then in Digital Europe, you also have this digital transformation, so how to boost the digitization in society. And there, I will speak very briefly of it, but the key vehicle there is the digital innovation hubs, where EU is trying to set up sort of support hubs that will help SMEs and public sector to digitize themselves and be a push for these technologies in society. Then you have the Connecting Europe facility. There is deployment of infrastructure for smart connectivity and associated services. Again, that will have NGI relevance. And the main focus there is 5G corridors along the road, so connected and automated mobility, so how to push the 5G infrastructure along those lines and then build systems on that. And then you have the Creative Europe program, which is about media and the cultural creative sector, where they work with distribution of works and creation of works and development of those kind of digitizations for the cultural sector. And all those four will probably have influence on what happens with NGI and what kind of NGI opportunities you have out there. In the research programs, again, coming back to this picture saying, well, we have money directly from the Commission in codes, but we also have partnership programs. And for NGI, the proposed partnerships in this cluster for digital industry and space, due to start in 2021, they have proposed these different partnerships programs. And the new thing there is really this smart networks and services, where I would say slightly, how do you say, slightly simplifying it, but they basically merging 5G infrastructure and NGI into the same partnerships and say these two will float into each other, and you can't really tell apart. And we need a partnership programs with European industry on the infrastructure level, but also on the sort of service and human-centric internet level in a joint partnerships. And if you look at the proposal for that, what do they fill this partnership program with? Well, they basically have two pillars proposed in that partnership programs. One on the research challenges, which are sort of both hard and soft things in the NGI sector. And then they have the sort of deployment capacity building, and here again you find this building of 5G corridors in the automotive along the roads, and also having stakeholders to discuss really the strategic agenda for deployment of technology, and having stakeholders to discuss the research questions. So there you have sort of, they're trying to build this really large stakeholder community to be able to discuss both NGI and the hardware below NGI, so to speak. And from sort of, if you look at the policy objectives of this digital cluster where NGI will be, what are the sort of political objectives of a 7-year digital clusters with a couple of billion euros? It is to a large extent geared towards European industry, but also, as you see at the bottom, sort of the two main policy goals. Of 6 policy goals, 2 of them are really very NGI focused. I would say that it's the program has to have major contributions towards inclusiveness, leaving one behind, and the human-centered approach for all technology development as well as the network development is sort of key policy. And over all of this, it was mentioned in the morning, but of course climate change and the SDGs is like an overarching, comes in everywhere. Don't try to do anything without commenting on whether or not you contribute to the 17 SDGs. This is also sort of the major policy goal governing the entire process forward. And inside the clusters, now I mentioned the partnership program and what kind of priorities they're trying to put in that partnership program and get all the sort of stakeholders interested in that into it. In the actual cluster, as I mentioned, sort of 5 big tickets, but here in the end, in this cluster for digital, industry and space, you get 11 different areas that this cluster should have call for proposals and support research and innovation projects in. And there you have sort of course, the next generation internet mentioned as a key area for the next 7 years to work on. And some of the other areas are, of course, AI, computing. They also connect into NGI, so it's not so easy to draw very, very hard borders between the different areas. But here you sort of see on the broad scale what are the priorities of the Commission, and now we're starting the discussion. So what should be the focus? Is it transparency, or what should the calls be in NGI and in the others? That's really the discussion starting right now. And well, so far what has been mentioned, so major challenges that are sort of being discussed or popping up in say, well, we should have a call looking at this more and more. So you have breach of security or privacy is sort of a major discussion. How do we really make it safe? And then the whole, how do I govern my data, or how do I trust you to govern the data you collect? Also, as was mentioned sometimes in the morning as well, the lack of accessibility. So all of a sudden, people being left behind or not having the ability to access the things done. Lack of user control, so you don't know what happens to the data you give up. And the whole, of course, manipulation, disinformation, deepfake, etc. We see more and more of sort of how do I keep control of, and that was mentioned this morning as well, sort of how do I know what the AI have decided for me, or what the system wants. And also mentioned several times is this kind of user lock-in. I shouldn't sort of have to click accept because that's the only way to get to the service I need. I have to be in control and really be able to say I want to swap vendor or get out of this. And the sort of the 3 aims of the NGI part is really, again, this human-centric, trustworthy internet, so enabling it, and also getting smart networks and services, content and platforms, etc. And also, which is what they're trying already now, how we build this agile ecosystem. It's not the difference between NGI and many other programs is that we need this kind of open calls, small funding, or other channels to reach sort of the entrepreneurs or the inventors that aren't sort of the R&D directors of Ericsson or ABB. It's communities out there that we don't meet in say, for instance, the aerospace industries or the automotive industries. You have a totally different landscape to work with as a funding agencies. But here we really have to figure out how to tap into this agile ecosystem that really are the innovators that can build the trustworthy internet technologies. And it's not going to be a total sort of big industry ain't going to do it alone. It will need this ecosystem. And as I mentioned in the beginning, this is not this is my timeline rather than it's not something that is written in law. But as I said in the beginning, if you want to spend money in 2021, you need to take a budget decision October, November. 2020 budget was taken like 2-3 weeks ago. And you need really all the details to be there. You can't just say, I want 100 million to NGI. You have to say, I want 10 million for blockchains, deadline the last of May. Then you can get a budget decision. So we need all the details here, even though the formal decision of a new program and a new program period happens in January 2021. We still need everything on the table here in October, November. Which means that the Commission needs to do what they call an inter-service consultation. So that's when they circulate the final drafts internally in the Commission and make sure that all the different departments in the Commission are sort of in consensus about what is about to happen. Which means that first drafts of detailed work programs need to show up in February, March somewhere, because you need to discuss them a couple of rounds in order to reach a final draft, which means that there are people already writing here in December. Otherwise, there won't be drafts. And there are already like informal meetings, workshops, etc., happening in Brussels and in the member states right now as we speak, in order to make this happen in the end. And just one example that I dug up just to say, well, this is the kind of things that are happening. So here you have NGI OT, so Next Generation Internet of Things, which is a stakeholder group. They have already made a scoping paper, 36 pages of how they think Internet of Things interact with the NGI program and what kind of calls they would like to have. And these kind of documents will start showing up from all kinds of interest groups saying, well, we think NGI should focus on this, so we think NGI should focus on that. It's very important that we get a call for that. And at the end of the day, if you can, of course, engage yourself in this planning process and say, well, then it's important that I get to say what I think is important, or you can just wait and say, well, the calls are probably broad enough for whatever I want to do, so I wait until the launch. And well, the launch of it all, so there's something on the EU level called the ICT conferences. They are roughly biannual. The last one was in Austria, ICT 2018, where about 6,000 participants. So it's really big digitization event for everything, not only NGI, but for autonomous driving, for e-health, for energy sector, you name it. Everything that has something digital in it is there, and it's presented both what kind of projects has there been previously and what kind of calls are there for the future. So this will sort of be the big launch for next program period, and it's hosted by the German presidency, that is president of EU in the autumn next year, and they will be in Cologne the 1st to 4th of December 2020. And this information is not publicly announced yet. The reason we know it is because they have already booked the venue, because if you're going to have a conference with 10,000 people or something like that, you need to book the conference fair long in advance. It will happen at that date, but we don't have the details. But you can always look at the Austrian one and say it will be roughly the same, but with this one having much more news about how the new programs will roll out. So with that, I will that's just the commission's different, and I bet Rebecca will have a similar, where can I find more information about NGI? But with that, I will hand over to Rebecca, and you will talk a bit about the really what are the opportunities now in 2020, if I don't want to wait until December 2020 to hear all the news of the future. So, Rebecca, welcome to the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. That was a good handover. So this is exactly what I'm going to do. I will describe what is actually going on when it comes to, in particular, open calls, because there are some practicalities that we need to be aware of, specifically NGI stakeholders that want to take part and actually get funded for innovative ideas. But first thing first, so I think that we had a number of very exciting talks in the morning session, and one thing that was that is common to all those talks is the notion and concept of human-centric. Now, what does that actually mean if we think about it? Well, if we take a step back and look at it from a zoomed out perspective, digitalization and massive data collecting leads to a lot of side effects. Some of them are anticipated and some of them are unanticipated, but they lead to infringements on our right to anonymity, our right to data ownership, and our right to have a secure connection and make secure data transactions. And this is quite problematic because internet and being connected is not only something that we are now getting used to as a very integrated part of our personal life and in our private sphere, but it's also something that has become and is becoming a critical societal function. And it does affect us also in the public sphere. And that basically means that future development of internet technologies have to be human-centric by design, because the side effects that we spot and observe today are not in the favor or benefit for human usage. Right? So this is basically what human-centric means. It could mean a lot of other things as well, but in a nutshell, this is what it means. All right, so to deal with these issues, we have the NGI initiative. So it's an initiative, a funding initiative that is aimed at supporting open innovation to deal with privacy and trust and security issues. And I would say that those aspects and that technology development that is expected from the open innovation initiatives are supposed to be bridging technologies on top of the enabling technologies that we know as, for example, AI, IoT, big data, and cybersecurity. So it's really in order to address the gray zone areas of technology development that hasn't really been addressed yet, or where there is a lot of work to do. And it is all aimed at making full-blown societal digitalization work so that it is safe to use. All right, so that's the background of that. So if we go back a little bit, we have now the third workshop, and we have had 2 previous workshops. And you could basically see this as a series of NGI information. So if you feel that you missed something today, or if something got a little bit out of context, it's very recommended that you also go and look into the 2 other previous workshops, so you can get significantly more information. And if that is of interest, then you can go to the Vinnova YouTube channel, and then you just search for NGI, and you will find all the broadcasts, including this one. Okay, so in the previous workshops, we focused mainly on the practicalities related to how to get funded if you act as an intermediary consortium for ICT 24. We will do a recap of that funding model and who got funded, but we will mainly now in this workshop focus on all the practicalities that you as a third-party stakeholder want to know. It will include that we will look at all the projects, all the ongoing NGI projects that are open for open calls and that are providing funding. And we will also look into a little bit more generic and general information where you can get into the details for each of these initiatives. So first thing first, let's go back and look at Horizon 2020 ICT 24, what it is and how it was built, because this is the funding call that is totally aimed at the next generation internet, and it is based on a different type of financing model than you would usually usually expect. It's cascade funding, which is different from the regular ICT calls that you normally would apply to if you have experience from that. In this variant, the consortium that apply for funding directly from the EU is actually an intermediary consortium. So what happens is that once an NGI project gets funded, the consortium as an intermediary will not actually consume that funding for R&D. It will be responsible for distributing 80% of that budget to third-party sub-grantees, basically. So this is different from regular calls, where normally, as a consortium, you would apply for funding from the EU, and then you would get the funding, and consume it for R&D, and that's that. So the task of the intermediary consortium is to distribute that funding and to set up the calls and the processes for initiating smaller projects that are about 9 to 12 months, and from a budget perspective, somewhere between 50,000 euros up to 200,000 euros. All right, so this is the background. So what we will focus on today, unlike in the previous workshops, we will focus on this part, the third-party calls. The two previous workshops were mainly focused on this part. And the reason for that is that the opportunities to apply for as an intermediary consortium, that is closed. So it was only 2 rounds, one in 2018 and one in 2019. And there will be no third round. And what we see here is that for different rounds, we have 3 different subtopics. And back then, when these were evaluated and different projects were approved, there was basically 1 project approved per subtopic. There is an exception in the 2018 round, so there were 4 projects approved. But essentially, it's 1 project per subtopic. So that means that we have from 2018, we have 4 projects that have been up and running for almost a year now. And very recently, I got to know about the new projects that got approved from the 2019 second round. So this is what we're going to focus on now. So this is the current situation of funded intermediary projects that are now handling and setting up the processes for third-party calls. So here we have the 4 approved projects from 2018. I think we know them from the second workshop as well, but we will go through them. And then we have from round 2 from 2019, 3 new projects that are brand new. I didn't actually know about them exactly until like 1 week ago or something like this. So what we will do now is that we will go through each one of these funding opportunities very briefly. I will not get into the details, but it's merely to highlight that they exist, to give you an idea what they are about, to make you aware of that there is this opportunity, but then you have to go and figure out the details, because for each call or for each type of project, there are different conditions and different expectations and different requirements and different rules that you need to actually get into the details with. So now you know. All such information is available on the ngi.eu/open calls. Okay, so let's start with the first one, which is NGI Zero Discovery, and it is within the subtopic of discovery and identification technologies. And essentially, it is focused on decentralized and privacy-preserving search. And this is a very exciting topic. And the coordinator is NLNet, which is a foundation in the Netherlands. And their approach and their funding model is that they do not have a fixed number of open calls. It's actually continuous, but with a bi-monthly cycle. And it will continue like that until the resources have been fully allocated. So this means that there are potentially plenty of opportunities continuously to apply, but don't wait too long, because at some point the funding will be up. So far, 43 projects have been approved, and that means that some of those projects have been up and running for almost a year, and some of those projects have recently been approved and will start very soon. There is no exact number of planned sub-grants, of course, because this is their model. The overall target for those that can apply for funding is basically anyone with an innovative idea. So there are basically no limitations. But as always, go and look into the details of the actual calls if in the case there are some limitations or expectations that you need to fulfill. You can also write them an email and actually ask about such details. But the type of support that you can expect from NLNet once you get a project approved is everything that ranges from accessibility and standardization, connections, internationalization and packaging towards products that comes out from your innovation, and all the kinds of support that you would really need to start developing your innovation from scratch or from some point, from some maturity level. This is my understanding. So we move on to the NGI Zero Pet, which is basically the same setup because it is NLNet that is coordinating also this one as almost a twin project. But it has a different angle and a different topic. So it's focused now more on privacy and trust enhancing technologies. And here it means to build all the building blocks and the middleware that you would need to increase trust and privacy. So it's not really limited to anything, it's quite open, as you can see. It has the same type of open calls continuity, and by now 69 projects have been approved. Some of those have been going on for a year and some of those have recently been approved. Same thing with the targeted stakeholders. Basically anyone with an innovative idea can apply, and you can expect the same type of support in general. Now we will move on to NGI Ledger, and this project has a slightly different or quite different open call model. The subtopic is also different. It's oriented on decentralized data governance formally, and as the name reveals, it's very much oriented on distributed ledger technologies. And the aim is more or less to retain the control over data. Coordinator is Funding Box from Poland, and this project has planned 2 calls. And in total, they are looking for 32 really good applications, 16 applications per call. One call or round has already been set up and finished, and they found 16 approved projects, and they are now looking for another 16 applications to approve. It's quite open who can apply, so anyone with a good innovative idea, it can be a internet researcher or a developer or entrepreneurs or SMEs or even research organizations can apply, but mind that you need to look at the rules when it comes to forming teams, and you need to really check that you fulfill those expectations properly. And the type of support that you can expect is everything ranging from research expertise and mentoring and coaching and investment opportunities and all the network that you would need to develop your innovation. Okay, then we have NGI Trust, which is also different from the 2 previous types of projects. So this one has a slightly different approach. This one focuses mainly on privacy and trust enhancing technologies too, and it's quite broad, but it handles basically everything that has to do with, for example, consent management, which we discussed earlier this morning, and IoT security and privacy, all those things that are very necessary to address. And the coordinator is the FE Center in Belgium, and they have planned 3 calls in total throughout the project duration. And one thing that I forgot to say is that basically all the projects that are intermediary projects are over 36 months. I haven't actually seen any example of fewer months than that, so just assume that it's 36 months. It doesn't appear that they planned a strict number of sub-grants to distribute, but what I do know is that 18 applications got approved in call 1, and there is a second call going on right now. And we will get back to that later when we've gone through the entire list of projects. But first, we look at these ones. So the target stakeholders ranges from SMEs to education to researchers and foundations, non-profit organizations. So the list here is slightly different from the previous ones. You can even be just you, an individual person that has an innovation that you want to develop further with this type of funding, and you can apply to this. So the type of support that we can expect from NGI Trust is mainly oriented on exploitation and commercialization, very similar to the previous ones as well, because this is in line with what we would expect from what we get for the NGI funding that goes into these third-party projects. So the support in general is very much oriented on how to commercialize and put the innovations on the market. Right? So those four were the ones from 2018, sorry, and from the first round. And that means that they have basically been up and running for almost 1 year, which means that very, very soon we will be able to get a little bit more statistics and a little bit more information about the actual result from the early open innovation initiatives that were launched early this year. So that will be very exciting to see what came out of it. There has been some early results that have been presented and reported, among other things, at the NGI Forum earlier this fall in Helsinki. So if you go into the NGI Forum and you look for the presentations, you will be able also to see some results that were very nice to see. So now we will move on to the second round approved projects from 2019. And like I said, this information that I have is very recent, and these projects didn't actually start yet. They will soon start, so the information is a little bit more sparse. But now you know that they exist. So we have to begin with the NGI SIF Lab. So the subtopic here is to strengthening the internet trustworthiness with electronic identities. And this is basically aimed at creating safer electronic transactions over the internet. And the coordinator is Tino from the Netherlands, and they have planned to have 2 open calls. And they also planned to have 58 sub-grants at most, and the target that is explicitly mentioned in the abstract text that I got is that they orient mainly on SMEs and startups. And that means also that the type of support that you can expect is really oriented on business and technical support, as well as acceleration of businesses and social applications. The next one is the NGI Pointer, and its subtopic is oriented on open internet architecture renovation. And the scope is, as one can imagine, protocols and open software and hardware for managing the internet. Very important stuff. So the coordinator is Funding Box from Poland, and they have planned 2 open calls and 48 sub-grants for the entire budget that they manage. And here the targets are entrepreneurs and internet researchers. So the type of support that one can expect is mentoring, and mentoring towards developing standards and minimum viable products. And also they set a goal, if I understood it right. So one goal of their project is to basically set up or support the rollout of 12 startups. That's a very specific goal. That is capable then of rolling out technologies at internet scale, so it's serious. Then we have, as a last project, the NGI Dexe. And that one is oriented on service and data portability. And it is also something that is very relevant, how to facilitate the portability of data between service providers. It's actually not that easy. So it's Sabala Innovation from Spain that is the coordinator, and they have 3 calls planned and up to 58 subgrants planned. They say that they target researchers, SMEs, and high-tech startups across Europe. So they will also give support with respect to visibility and community building and investments and mentoring and coaching and so on. Everything that you need to get your innovation into a business. Okay, so one thing that I decided to do, because this is the end of the list of approved projects, one thing that I decided to do was to try to facilitate life a little bit for everyone who actually wants to apply, because it's not easy to get this information. Who has an open call? Well, this information is easy to find because it's on the NGI EU. But when is the next call? Because probably you want to plan if the time is a little bit short. So I did this, and I want to at least state reservation that there could be mistakes in here. You need to go and check yourself on the ngi.eu/open calls, but this is basically what it looks like. So if we take a little look, we see that we have 4 open calls going on right now. So for the NGI 0, Discovery and PET, they have been open since October 1st, and they will close on December 1st. That's on Sunday. Right. But because they have repeated bi-monthly cycles, one could pretty much expect that they will open again on the 1st of December and be open all the way to 1st of February. If they are not, it means that the money ran out. I don't think that will happen, but not now. Anyway, so it's not too late. NGI Ledger has been open for a while, since November 1st, and it will continue all the way to the last of January. So there is plenty of time. This is probably time that you want to make the most of, specifically because it is the last call. After this second call, there is nothing. So what didn't get done by the 31st of January 2020 will not get done in that project. All right, so then we have NGI Trust that also closes on Sunday. It's the second call. If you think that it's a little bit too short of time, there is a third chance between 1st of February and April 1st, 2020. Or you have the same mindset as I do, and you think that you have Thursday and you have Friday, and then you have the whole Saturday, and then you have basically half of Sunday, and that's a lot of time, right? If you have a really good idea and you are burning with desire to get this NGI funding, it's not really an effort. So it could be worth trying, because if you fail, it's really not a failure. It's just that you get good feedback, and then you can submit it again in another call. So it's actually not wasted effort if you just want to see how strong your proposal is. That's a good thing to do. So for the other 3, I don't have any information at all. So a qualified guess is that there will be something that starts in the first quarter of 2020. All right. Then I also want to highlight that there are some other NGI-related initiatives that are not spun from the ICT 24 call, but they are related to NGI. And there are 2 projects that are more focused on over-Atlantic collaboration. So NGI Explorer is also focused on solving a number of innovation challenges for the NGI, but it is in collaboration with American partners. So basically what you apply for is some funding to go over to the United States and solve some challenges there, and then come back and report how it went. Then we have NGI Atlantic, which seems to be more oriented on fellowships. I don't know much more about it, but you can read more about it on the ngi.eu. Then we also have a similar intermediary call like the ICT 24, but it's called ICT 54, and it's oriented on blockchain for NGI. And it is basically the same setup as for ICT 24. It's cascade funding. If you apply as an intermediary consortium, you will be responsible for distributing 80% of the funding or something along those lines to third-party calls or sub-grantees. And similarly to ICT24, there are also different themes that your proposal as an intermediary consortium or intermediary applicant need to sort of follow. Okay, some general information. So as always, there is all information about NGI and calls and ongoing initiatives is available on the ngi.eu, and the same goes for the open calls. So all you need to do is to press these buttons, and then you get more information about that particular project. But you can also go and visit ngi.eu to get information about events, and you can comment on surveys and add your influence to what's going to happen next in the NGI initiative. So keep an eye out, it's interesting. If you also want to find collaboration partners, one good thing to do is to add yourself to the NGI map so that you manifest your existence and manifest your interest. This is a good way of also finding other partners. So no harm in adding yourself there and your organization. Then finally we have the Swedish node. It's basically a number of links and contacts for getting in touch with me, the national contact point. And this is something that you can do whenever you are in doubt, when you have a question, or you need more information, or even to maybe also get connected with somebody. And speaking of being connected, one thing that I would like to ask is that if there are any Swedish stakeholders or Swedish applicants that, or stakeholders that are interested in NGI, I would be very happy if you just contacted me. I would like to know if you are planning to apply for an open call. I would also like to know if you already did, and I would like to know the outcome. And why is this? It's because it's nice to keep in touch, but it's also a way for us to also help you in this process. So don't hesitate to drop me an email or contact Johan as well. All right, so that's basically everything that I had to say today. And before Johan wraps this session up, I want to say thank you for listening and thank you for watching.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much, Rebecca, and thank you those of you who have watched online and also those of you that are here today. So with that, we will wrap up this session. For those that are here in person, we have some fika pause, and you have possibility to talk with me and Rebecca bilaterally. And as Rebecca already have said, those of you watching online, do keep in touch, do keep us informed. And NGI, there's a lots of opportunities the coming year, and there's 7 more years in the new programs that we are shaping now. So this will definitely be a topic coming back in various forms, and we hope to see you all again soon. So thank you very much.